We begin this news hour with a warning from the US State Department that Russia is planning on stepping up its attacks on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure and government facilities in the coming days. It's told its citizens to leave the country. The US issued its warning as increased security measures were introduced across Ukraine. In Kharkiv in the east, a nightly curfew has been extended. In Kyiv, away from the front lines, public events to mark Ukraine's Independence Day are banned until Thursday. Tensions are particularly high following a string of explosions in Russian-occupied Crimea and the killing of political journalist Daria Dugina outside Moscow. Well, the funeral for Ms. Dugina has been held in Moscow. The 29-year-old was killed in a car bombing on Saturday. Her father, Alexander Dugin, a far-right nationalist and ally of Vladimir Putin, was among the mourners. The Russian president has described her killing as evil. Russia's security services has released a video that it says shows the assassin. The agency maintains the Ukrainian woman, who is in her 40s, had been planning Saturday's attack since July. Kyiv denies it is responsible. Her father paid this tribute.
She had no fear. The last words she said during our conversation at the Tradition Festival were, "Father, I feel like a warrior, I feel like a hero. I want to be one. I don't want any different fate. Want to be with my people, with my country."
Well, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov condemned the killing and said there can be no mercy for those responsible.
I cannot judge whether this was an act of intimidation or a settling of scores. I believe that it is a barbaric crime that can never be forgiven. Now, as I understand it, the FSB has already established the facts, which are now being investigated. The investigation will hopefully be completed soon. According to the results of this investigation, there can be no mercy for those who organized, ordered and carried out the bombing.
Well, for more on the war in Ukraine, we can now bring in military analyst Doug Brooks, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Great to see you, as always, Doug. Let's start with what we're hearing from the United States. I wonder if you might tell us more about these reports from U.S. officials warning about Russia potentially stepping up attacks in Ukraine in the coming days.
Well, the statement that came from the embassy was fairly vague, and it basically just says that there will be attacks on government and civilian infrastructure, and it really doesn't go into any more details than that. That's probably because the U.S. doesn't like to reveal its sources, so it doesn't want everyone to know where this information is coming from. But thus far, of course, we know they have very good sources within the Russian government. They knew that the invasion was coming. They made other predictions that have been right on the money. So this is probably worth paying attention to. And of course, today is Flag Day in Ukraine, as you mentioned, and tomorrow is the Independence Day. So it seems like a good time for the Russians to do something like that.
You are, of course, a man with an ear to the ground, so to speak. Do you know what intelligence information these warnings are based on?
No idea, not at this point. So that's the word from the embassy. And I mean, the U.S. intelligence has generally been correct on this stuff. So it's worth watching.
You do have a point there, because I have to mention that in the run-up to the war in Ukraine, most people thought Moscow was bluffing, but I mean, Washington called it right and was in no doubt that an invasion would happen. So when the US State Department warns, as it just has, that Russia is about to significantly step up its attacks across Ukraine, we should take note, shouldn't we?
Absolutely, and I think we need to, hopefully when the U.S. comes out with a statement that sort of predicts something like this, the Russians will take note and realize that it's just that they've already been predicted. They probably shouldn't do it. But, the U.S. said exactly that at the beginning of the invasion, saying that we hope the Russians don't invade, but it really looks like they're going to do that. And again, the U.S. intel was right that time.
And of course, Doug, you know quite a few people in Ukraine. I remember you traveling through there recently, people in the military and so on. I wonder what they make of being told that they can't celebrate Ukraine's Independence Day at the very time they're fighting to preserve their independence?
I'm sure private celebrations will go on, but I think everybody recognizes the risk of large gatherings, especially when Russia seems to be losing. So the Russians have done quite a bit in terms of blowing up, hospitals and schools and things like that. And in fact, if you recall, just a couple of months ago, they managed to hit a train station full of refugees, and that seems to have been quite deliberate. So I think everybody in Ukraine is pretty comfortable with the idea that it's a bad idea to get together in large groups at this point.
And of course, in Moscow itself, hundreds of people gathered for a memorial ceremony for Daria Dugina, the daughter of that prominent Russian ultra-nationalist intellectual. She was killed in a car bombing that Russia blames on Ukraine. And the message was that the Russian people are under attack because she died in Russia and what they're calling the front line. I mean, how is that message cutting through?
It's a puzzling and scary case. It's interesting that immediately after this event happened where she was killed, the FSB found out who actually did it and posted photos of an alleged assassin and so on. But then there's all sorts of questions about the evidence that they're showing, including an ID card that is clearly forged, and the possibility that this alleged assassin is actually married to or sort of significant other ways somebody who helped get the independence for this, pseudo-independent Ukrainian state that the Russians created. So it's all very murky exactly who killed this woman. The Ukrainians, of course, have denied it. And it doesn't make any sense why the Ukrainians would do it. She is yes, she's an ultra-nationalist. Yes, she's called essentially for the genocide of Ukraine and the conquest of it, as has her father. But she's a fairly minor player. There's no pictures of her father with Putin, so he's not like a major player in the game. So if they're trying to kill her father, that doesn't make any sense either. I mean, yes, he's a jerk and he's obviously anti-Ukraine. But if you're going to send a hit squad into Ukraine or into Russia into a very secure area of Moscow to try and take out a heavyweight in Russia, she seems like a really small fish and for that much risk.
Nevertheless, Russian state television has been relentlessly saying that Ukraine is a terrorist state and Russia will have to respond to what they claim was an assassination attack by a Ukrainian agent. I mean, what shape might that Russian response take? I wonder if it's related to the warning from the Americans.
This is a really, really good point that you're making. And what we have seen, unfortunately, in the past under Putin is the Kremlin creating pretexts for violence. Most notably during Chechnya, they blew up literally apartment buildings to sort of create a reason that they can go and invade Chechnya. This could be something similar. It could be that they've decided this is fairly ruthless and some people won't believe the Kremlin's capable of this, but I think we've seen it quite a bit. They may be trying to create a pretext to become much more violent, either in Ukraine or even in Estonia, where this alleged assassin fled to, allegedly. So it's all very murky, and it's a little bit scary that for months now, the Ukrainians have been pointing out that the Russians have been attacking civilian targets deliberately and killing civilians deliberately. Maybe this is Russia trying to create some sort of pretext that they're saying now Ukraine's a terrorist state and they need to respond with increased violence. It's very scary.
Well, as you said, a time to be on the alert. Doug, thanks ever so much. Doug Brooks is a military analyst and he was talking to me there from Washington.